Good morning, my friends. How are you doing today? Excuse my darkened, scruffy appearance. I'm a little sleepy. It's been a busy day. Busy day yesterday. I got home really late from helping run an event. But I wanted to talk about an experience I had yesterday morning. About a year and a half ago, I left a workplace where I had a particularly difficult experience. And during that time, I felt a really kind of degrading of my personhood. I felt like I wasn't seen for what I had to offer, and it got quite a chronic place, which is why I left the organization. Well, since then, every time I go into a traditional office environment, I feel this thing stir up inside me. And Monday, I'd gone into an office, which was a wonderful place, absolutely no slight on the organization, and all this thing was reacting inside me, feeling like I had nothing to offer, feeling like I was doubting my gifts and my abilities, and all this, quite sudden, profound lack of confidence and negative self-talk arising in my mind, which, as you know, I spend a lot of time with really positive self-talk, so it was interesting. Also, over this weekend, I'd had quite a lot of just stirring in my heart, a lot of emotional stuff coming forward, and I had the sense that there was a part of me, some emotional space inside, ready to come forward and present itself for more healing, more integration. Yeah, thanks, Mind of Soul. Imposter syndrome, very much like the imposter syndrome. I've read a bit on that. I certainly wouldn't say that I'm an expert, but aspects of that, but specifically with a sense that they were locked to a time or a memory or an event. And so yesterday morning, I spent some time journaling and meditating on the subject. So I started with just sort of a simple journaling process, talking. I journal always on my laptop, the reason being that I can type a lot faster than I can write by hand. And so for me, it's a medium that works better with my flow. So I spend a time just pouring out my thoughts and then listening to whatever God would have in response. And then I put that aside and tuned into my emotional space and just began to see who was present. Now, what I'm going to describe here, I describe in much more detail in the devotional that I've got coming out very shortly. And if you want to jump on the email list for that, just go to jonathanpuddle.com/DEVO and you can stay in the loop on that. So I checked into my inner space where in my kind of mind's eye, my imagination, I can sense my emotional framework, my inner child, my kind of grown-up functional self, as well as kind of my amygdala, the kind of like the protector who keeps me safe. And what I sensed was, I check into this space pretty regularly, and there was kind of like a whirlwind. So I could tell, okay, there's some chaos inside, there's something that's not feeling integrated. So I spent some time just feeling and sensing and asking myself, okay, Jonathan, what's up? And I felt an emotional, actually sort of a picture began to play of myself walking to my old place of work. And as I looked at the version of myself that was walking, I could see he was hunched over, carrying a heavy burden. And as I allowed my emotional self to connect with that kind of manifestation in my mind's eye, I could feel the pain and just how kind of degraded his personhood felt. So I began to discuss just delicately with my kind of inner self, just, okay, Jonathan, I see that pain that you're carrying. I see that confusion that you're carrying. I see that you tried to give them your very best, but it wasn't received. It wasn't accepted. I could feel the pain that I was carrying, and I kind of invited myself to release that pain, invited God to take that pain away from me, and I felt kind of a blockage. So what I've learned to do in that kind of situation is to check with myself and just ask, okay, is there anyone here protecting me? Is there anyone, maybe a hidden protector, a guardian that's kind of got a pain management system here in place that is kind of blocking this trauma from flowing out from me? And immediately as I said, is there someone here who's hidden, who's protecting me? A voice spoke up and said, yes, I'm here. This is not obviously an audible voice. This is just kind of within my psychological framework. And I said, okay, who's this? And I felt this kind of presence in my mind essentially say, yes, I am the self-critic, that I decided that it was much easier for Jonathan to essentially, it was easier for me to criticize him and shut him up than for him to keep giving ideas that would be rejected. And so I began to criticize him in such a way that he would doubt his contributions, and he would doubt his self-worth in this space, so that he would not continue giving ideas, only for those ideas to be painfully rejected. Basically, we felt that was the best compromise. And I'd never really clued into that, but it was fascinating to me that some part of my psychological framework made the determination that after my ideas had been rejected and my proposals had been shut down enough times, some part of my system sort of came online and said, okay, well, let's stop Jonathan from this rejection. If he doesn't believe he has anything to offer, he won't get rejected. Problem solved. And so, in the past, I might have beaten myself up for that kind of self-talk and for that kind of self-protection. But I've learned that doesn't help. So I said, in that kind of quiet, meditative space, I said, okay, wow, thank you for doing what you could do to protect me. That's really precious and beautiful, that you would work hard to protect me, that you would come up with a way of keeping me safe from harm. Thank you for doing that work. That being said, we're no longer in that space. We're no longer there. We've left. And whether you intended this or not, actually that your voice began to degrade my sense of value beyond the simple scope of that scenario. What if actually no, what I said next, and this is all just in a quiet, space, just kind of chewing over my own thoughts in the stillness of my room. What I said was, do you know Jesus? He's over there. Because in my mind space, Jesus is always present with the rest of my kind of psychological framework. And I said, have you noticed that Jesus has ways of protecting that don't degrade in any fashion? And the kind of framework, the voice said, yeah, I can see that, and isn't that interesting? And I said, would you like to go and just spend time with Jesus? And that protector sort of said, yeah, for sure. And I kind of sensed him move out of the way. And then I was able to go back through, and I could talk once again to that kind of emotional snapshot of myself at that age and say, I can see all this pain you're carrying. You understand now why. The pain wasn't just the rejection. The pain was the self-rejection that came on as a protection mechanism. And so at that point, I could just feel some of that trauma being released. And I just asked Jesus to release that trauma. And a little bit of simple EMDR, if that's totally foreign to you, it's this idea that through sensory triggering, triggering not in a bad sense, but through sensory engagement, we can help our left brain and right brain and all the different areas of our brain interact. So when you're doing EMDR with a therapist, they've got a bunch of different ways that they'll do that, maybe with walking, maybe with tapping, or with sound. And I just did a really simple, just kind of like this, which triggered physical movement and sound in both ears, and just asked, Jesus, would you release this trauma from this part of me? And I just was present to the emotion, present to the pain, and I felt a lessening of that. It was really quite remarkable. So if that is of interest to you, if you want to hear, get a lot more, I know that may sound totally weird and totally like, Jonathan, I'm on board, but how do you do that? I've explained that in like a 28-day step-by-step devotional, which is coming out in the next few months. If you go to jonathanpuddle.com/devo, you can just jump on the email list and stay in the loop for when that comes out. But you are allowed to be responsible for your emotional, psychological framework. You can steward your heart and your mind to greater wholeness and healing. You are allowed to love yourself the way God loves you. I'm just seeing there from Mind of Soul, rejection, self-rejection, and possibility of rejection. This is amazing. You work with your body. Thank you. I've learned this right over the last year, sitting on this couch, as many of you have seen time and time again. That inner critic, that voice that condemns you inside, you are allowed to befriend that voice because it's probably pretty convinced that it has to protect you because no one else did. So you can work gently and graciously with that inner critic and help to relieve it of its heavy burden. If you just take the mindset that every single part of you, every single voice that you hear inside, without talking about, complex kind of schizophrenic level voices, just within your own framework, every one of those parts of you have only ever been doing the best they can to try to keep you safe and try to keep you out of pain and try and keep you in pleasure. But some of the ways they've learned to behave have borne bad fruit. So you can gently coach them to Jesus, who doesn't bear bad fruit. So may you this year and this week learn to speak very graciously to yourself and win over your inner critic and help him or her dial back the intensity of that response. And my encouragement is to just do it graciously, do it kindly, and say, hey, thank you so much for keeping me safe. Have you noticed, though, that some of the ways you do it are hurting me? Is there perhaps another way we could move forward? And I love always turning back to Jesus. Have you noticed that guy is able to do it without harm to anybody? Have you heard his stories? Have you heard the way he protects, the way he lifts people out of the dust, the way he removes shame from people? Would you like his help? Because he's always generous, he's always willing, and he's always present. So may that be a source of hope to you today. Grace and peace to you, my friends. And go sign up for that devotional. It's it'll be print, audiobook, ebook, everything, and it'll be coming out really soon. It's called You Are Enough, Learning to Love Yourself the Way God Loves You. Thanks for listening, guys. It means so much. Have a great day.